Hey guys, Francis here, and I want to share with you a couple of things to help if you're having wrist pain during your exercise. So today we're going to look at the placement of your hands, the foundation, and 2 fixes for taking the pressure off. All right, you ready? Let's go. Okay, first of all, placement. So just to know, first of all, what's possible in the wrist range of motion. Full range of motion for your wrist is 80 to 90 degrees. Right? So if you hold your arm out and you fold at your wrist and it's not going that far, maybe you have an old injury, you might not do so well to have your hand right underneath your shoulder when you're on all fours or plank, because it's going to push you past a good deal past your normal range of motion. That's one possibility for pain in your wrist while you're exercising. Now, I should say up front, if you do have pain, you should always listen to that pain, get it checked out. Don't let it go unchecked. Right? But if it's something that just sort of tends to come up while you're exercising and you're looking for a simple quick fix that might be really helpful, and it does help, then these things could help, right? But if it persists, you really should get it checked out by a professional and make sure that it's really okay. There could be something going on that we're not aware of. But in general, if you're relatively healthy, you can check out your range of motion first, and then notice if you have your hands directly underneath you, right, underneath your shoulders, that's going to be a 90-degree angle. You definitely don't want to have your wrist beyond 90 degrees, which would mean your hand would be behind your shoulder. This happens sometimes when people are moving from plank pose into chaturanga. Sometimes they'll dive the torso. I won't do it with my own body fully, but if you dive the torso way forward and then the forearm goes beyond 90 degrees, then there can be more of an angle at the wrist that is kind of really not so healthy for the wrist because it's not built to do that. Right, so no more than 90-degree angles. So even in chaturanga, you want to make sure that forearm is perpendicular to the floor, no further. But if you have wrist issues or pain, you might want to even back off a little bit from that angle. So that is our placement, right? So what you can do to fix that, right, if you have less than 90 degrees, which is usually can be the case, you can move your hands just a touch further toward where your head is, right, then instead of being directly under your shoulders. So one hand's distance is not a bad fix. So you can try that. Okay, now the second thing we said we would talk about is your foundation, right? So placement. Maybe one hand's forward will help. Again, you have to try individually. If you are looking at your foundation, there's a couple things we want to look at. Number one, in the bony structure of the hand, in the inner heel of your hand, the inner corner, right, there are 2 little bones in there, right, that are a kind of between those 2 bones and the base of the index finger. So I'm going to show my hand up really close. Okay, so what you want to think of is what I'm going to call the pillar of the hand, inner corner of the heel and the index finger knuckle, right? I just recommended to a student of mine, I worked with a teen just like a few minutes ago, that if they drew a picture of a triangle and could think of that picture, right? You don't have to draw on your hands now, but just visualize that triangle, long triangle shape right there. And if you focus on putting your weight there, right, as your foundation, that is a strong, stable foundation. A lot of times in yoga class, what will happen is the index finger knuckle will buckle up. So if my hand is on the floor and my index finger knuckle buckles up, right, that's usually the case. Like a lot of teachers will put their finger underneath that knuckle and say, push on my hand, right, as a fix. What that does is it puts a lot of weight in the outer part of the heel of your hand, okay? And then, there are a lot of little bones in your hand, the carpal tunnel, there are nerves that kind of travel through that space. So you don't want to put pressure just on the wrist, right, just on the wrist. You want to get a nice, solid, flat hand, like you're making a Hollywood handprint in the cement on your mat, right? You're a movie star while you're putting that handprint on the mat. Okay, so that pillar of the hand, those 2 bones on the inner corner of the heel of the hand and that first finger, if you ground through there, you're likely going to be able to get a nice Hollywood handprint. Okay, so that's 2 kind of pieces of information on the foundation. Think of the pillar, and also you don't want to have your weight just on the outside heel of your hand and your fingers all lifted. Nice Hollywood handprint. Okay, so now we've talked about our placement and foundation. Now, 2 ways to take off pressure. Okay, so take some of the pressure off of your hands. And this is going to be dependent on what you're doing. All right, So it may be appropriate for some exercises, and for some other exercises, it may not. If you're doing slower practice with more sustained holds, you can take some of the pressure off your hands by putting a block underneath your hands. Okay, so what this will do is put more pressure into the bottom, into where your feet are, right? So your feet will be holding more of the weight when your hands are lifted like this, if you put some blocks underneath your hands. Okay, again, it's exercise dependent. If you are using weights, you want to use a weight that is big enough, right? So these are 8-pound weights. Now, again, it depends on the exercise you're doing. If you're doing something where you have to keep moving these aside, that may not be appropriate with an 8-pound weight, because then in that process, you're not being mindful in transition. But if you're just doing some, sustained work, then you can use weights to change your base, right? So what this does is your position is not the extension of the wrist anymore. You're now more of like if you were doing knuckle push-ups in that position. So you can use some weights, but you got to make sure they're a good size, and then you're not having to move them a lot for your exercise. The other piece of the puzzle of this is you could just go to using your fist, right? So if you make a fist, you want to make sure that when you close your hand, your thumb placement is very important. You want to tuck your thumb in front of your knuckles, okay? So if you were to close your thumb underneath your fingers and do a karate punch, that's how you break your thumb, right? That's how you remember. You're like, don't break your thumb if you're doing karate. Have your thumb to the outside of your knuckles. You don't want your thumb sort of poking out to the side, because then you could put undue pressure on just your thumb. Now, this is a practice that takes some getting used to, but you can, if you're using your hand on the floor, you want to make sure you're in a straight aligned position here. You're not curved any funky way, but if you're in a straight aligned position there, then you can start to build strength, right, in those muscles in the forearm to sustain you in that fist position for the alternative, right, if your hands are not comfortable on the floor. So it's a lot of information, but I hope it's helpful. So looking at the foundation, like the placement of your hands, depending what's happening with your wrist, your foundation, right, 2 ways to kind of keep it grounded, really solid, and then also taking pressure off of your hands for more slow, sustained movements. I hope that's helpful, and just helps you stay more happy and healthy in your body. Feel free to share this video if you have a friend who's got some sore wrists and needs some help. Also, remember again, if something else is going on, you have to get it checked out. You definitely take good care of your body. We want to keep you happy and healthy and strong for the long run. All right, take care. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.